location. But note there the little 360, 330 BC date. That's a radiocarbon date. And when you get radiocarbon dates, you don't get a precise date to the year. You get this big range of dates that comes back. And basically you can date anything which is organic. In this case, it's from a piece of charcoal. And what it is was a tiny pit, about so diameter, so deep, full of charcoal. And when it's analysed, it was this. It's muesli, basically. And what you're looking at here is amazingly, in 1986, this was the richest ever food deposit found in the UK. And it just shows you, first of all, how little we know about this particular period, and just how far back in time you are. And you're looking at the very beginnings of agriculture in this part of the world. And interestingly, the people here are growing wheat and barley at that period, almost 5,500 years ago. But also, interestingly, collecting wild food still, and probably wild food was still a big part of their diet. So essentially it's crabapple and lots of hazelnut, burnt hazelnut in that food deposit. So it's a deliberately burnt food deposit in this little tiny pit. And that's the first hint of anything really early taking place here. And that in 1986, that was the only thing we had at that particular date. And we had to jump to our work in 2018 to find something of similar date. Don't always believe digging for Britain, where you see a nice sunny, dry. This is the reality of what archaeology is often like in commercial archaeological terms. This was January 2018. Stripping the topsoil off for the widening of the road. And what we're getting here it's just a little insight of what was happening in that particular bit of the site. Nothing's dramatically spectacular, but it all adds up to the bigger picture. And so what you're getting are an arc of post holes, which I'll say a bit more about later on. They don't difficult to interpret on their own, but I think a bit more of a picture of what's going on now. You get stones, big stones, deliberately placed into pits, and that's quite common. And the other very common thing you get in this very early period, we're looking at the round about 5,000 years ago, is pits which are full of stones, but other things put in them as well. Pottery is deliberately broken and placed in pits. Sometimes you get bits of stone, polished axe, sometimes broken, placed in pits, sometimes with food deposits, but all deliberately placed. And this is sort of often the earliest and often the only bit of evidence you get for this period, this long period in many parts of the UK. All you're finding are these little groups of pits where they're doing things, and we don't really understand what they are doing, but this is the evidence you're getting, and this is what we're getting here. So round about probably a bit later in that food deposit, people are still doing things on this site, coming here, this special site, and doing things which we don't quite understand what they are. And this is the type of pottery you're getting. It's extremely rare, certainly in Western Wales. This is the only, I think there's a couple of pieces from Llandersil, in south of the county. Then there's this, that's a whole lot there. Some from Anglesey, and then you get into eastern England, southern England, where you start to get more. So it's extremely rare stuff. You don't find this very often, and it's not easy to recognise. That's the reproduction bowl of what it probably would look like in reality. That's what it looks like when you get out of the ground, often just mistaken for bits of mud or stone. And we jump forward a bit more again. This is a couple of weeks ago, one of Toby's drone photographs, and this is the strip we did, the topsoil strip we did in advance of a cycle path, which is still being constructed. If you go past there now, I'm not sure what stage of construction is, but anyway. And this is unexpected. What we had here was part of a ring ditch showing, which has mostly been taken out by that road built in the 1930s. But you can see a big deep ditch with a pit circle within it as well, or post circles that were set of upright posts. And remember the one I just showed earlier on the other side of the triangular shaped piece of land. And that's what it looks like just on a plan of that. You can see probably 70% of it was taken out by that road in the 1930s. And one bit may have been taken out just the edge of by the gas pipeline as well in 1986. So unfortunately it's almost all gone. Again, that's what it looks like in reality on the ground. You can see that the deep, nice sort of V-shaped ditch there that was dug around it, very neatly dug, and the ring of post holes showing. We're still waiting. The only way we can date this is by radiocarbon dates, which we've got samples, which we only finished a couple of weeks ago, so we send those off to be analysed, which they will probably go to Miami, we're sent to be analysed there and dated, but that'll take some time. But we're assuming this is a Neolithic pit or post circle. And again, these little pits showing up. There's a little bit of pottery. You can see Jessica there, just uncovered in that pit. Same sort of period pottery as before, these little pits being dug, placing these pots, deliberately breaking them and put them into these pits, close to that circle. I looked at back some of the early evidence we had from 1986, and the blue bit there is what we excavated. You see the little post holes, and the purple is from the geophysical survey. In 1986, we just had what's just a straight line of very shallow ditch. Couldn't make much sense of it. It was just there. But when you put it to geophysics, it's a part of it's actually a polygon rather than a true circle. We see it is part of a big monument, which may have been another circle of posts. And this is what possibly these things may have looked like in reality. This is obviously a reconstruction one from Northumberland. A henge, named after Stonehenge, the Hayes henges, although Stonehenge actually archaeologically isn't a henge, but it's what it looks like, or may have looked like. You can see the big deep ditch around it and a bank on the outside and the timber uprights placed there. Some sort of ceremonial site, similar to a stone circle, probably function to a similar way to a stone circle, but where you haven't got ready available stones, you use timber. And we may have then 3 of these at Gogerddan, and they're not common. I mean, you're talking about a few dozen from the UK at maximum. We move forward a bit more forward in time into the Bronze Age. We're looking now round about 1300 BC, so we move forward probably a couple of thousand years. And still things are happening, so people are coming back to this site and doing things. And this is a standing stone, obviously, which is shown on the maps, or wasn't shown on the maps. And the reason why it wasn't shown on some of those maps, particularly the last 1905 Ordnance Survey map, is when it fell over and was re-erected. I'd like to think it's probably re-erected during the construction of the road in the 1930s, perhaps when there's some machinery there to do so. But you can see, if I can work out what it is, well, how do I work this out? We are. That there, the base of a wine bottle. And below the stone, I know it's below it because actually we moved the stone, it was more bits of wine bottle. So that stone fallen over and probably replaced sometime perhaps in the 1930s, sometime after 1905. And we moved it simply because it was too dangerous to work around safely. And what we're getting are some very shallow pits, some stone-lined pits and things associated with this post hole, with this standing stone, sorry. And they're just really, really not particularly interesting features in their own right. Very difficult to date when standing stones are erected, unless you get bits of wine bottle below them, because you don't tend to get many artefacts. So you're just dating things around them. So in this case, it's a very, very, very shallow pit, which has some charcoal in it, which had a date there of you can see there from, let's say, around about 1000 BC or so. Maybe when the stone was erected, probably was. As we know from other sites, that's when standing stones are being put up around this sort of period, around about 1500 BC to 1000 BC. And what you do find, if you get a site which has got really good preservation, you really get spectacular remains. This is Devil's Coit standing stone, which we excavated in the 1970s. And here it's on limestone, and it's on wind-blown sand as well. And what they've done around here is, as well as a standing stone, they put hundreds and hundreds of little tiny upright stones fanning out from it. You'll see there. And the reason why they're preserved is because it's on this South Pembrokeshire, not far from the coast, and wind-blown sand came over and covered those over and sealed them. The stone itself was put up over a burnt-down roundhouse, which had human remains in it, and it's unclear whether that roundhouse was burnt down deliberately with a person in it, or in fact it was an accidental burning down of the roundhouse. Whatever it was, the standing stone seems to be erected over the roundhouse to commemorate the event. And also what you do get are, that pit there had this in it. Limestone, you get good bone preservation. What you don't get at Gogerddan is bone preserved. You've got extremely acid soils, the bone rots extremely quickly. And this is a late Iron Age crouch burial, around about 1st century AD, BC, put up or dug in the ground over 1,000 years after that stone was set up. So again, people return to this particular site just as they are at Gogerddan, because here we have some Iron Age burials here as well. People return to the site, and it's that little figure of 8 bit there, which the gas pipe went straight through. And that's a bit of detail of it. As well as the figure of 8 one, which is very deep ditches, there's another smaller ring ditch to the north, which had a central crouch burial in it, a double crouch burial nearby, and a cremation burial in the ditch of the ring ditches, and another crouch burial with some brooches. And you're probably asking, how do you know, if there's no bone surviving, how do you know these are burials? And the reason we do, there's 2 reasons in this case. One is, on the right, you see here, obviously, it's the gas pipe being constructed. We're trying to work around it. On the right-hand side, you see that smaller ring ditch with those little sample bags being taken. We took loads of soil samples over that burial, and what you do find is you get enhanced phosphate, which indicates something, presumably a person's been buried in that grave. There's no bone. So that is a reasonable assumption to make. Once this had happened, the figure 8 ring ditches are there. So we excavated this before the pipe put in the ground, and we had to excavate these once the pipe had gone in the ground. And you can see them, the circles there before excavation. You can see a gas pipeline, backfill trench there, and there's the ditches. That's a double, soon-to-be crouch burial there, and there's another one just there. The cremation burial was just in that ditch there. These are Iron Age. These are, say, around about probably 1st, 2nd century BC, that sort of period. Looks very similar to the one on the other side of the road we excavated very recently, but perhaps 2,000, 3,000 years later, perhaps. And the only reason why we know they're burials is because some artefacts, amazingly, these, apart from the wine bottle and a few other bits of more recent stuff, these were the only artefacts from the site. 2 brooches, pibell, which have been with the burial, and have been little brooches put on to hold a cloak in position. No bone, again, just that's all you get. So we got this, moving on in time yet again. There we are. Just to show me how it did move a stone. It's about 6 tons it weighs. We did put it back. It's back happily back in its original position. That's where a stone was there. And as we worked around it, we realised we're getting graves, east-west aligned graves, beginning to appear. It's grave-shaped pits, because again there's no burials in them. And there they are, just a plan of those with some rectangular structures, which I'll say a bit about in a second. But what's perhaps interesting about this is that that's these earlier Bronze Age pits dating to 1000 BC. We're now into the 5th, 6th centuries AD, and those graves and the features seem to be avoiding that area. So the assumption is that you've got some sort of surface marking taking place around what are going to be low earthwork mounds or something, which the graves are respecting, these later graves. Of course, at the time of the excavation, it's just one flat field. And this is this interesting bit of this particular cemetery. We can see just a rectangular shape appearing there. That's what it looks like when it's excavated. It's a small timber building, central grave, a door, east-facing door with 2 posts and a little pit inside with stone lining. And when you look at the detail of the grave itself, which is here, there's a little, the black line there is remains of a wooden coffin. No bone, but a bit of stain of the coffin. And we actually, there was enough fibrous material in that to get a radiocarbon date, hence we know it's 5th, 6th century. Otherwise we'd be struggling to know what date these things were. So those graves are east-west aligned in the Christian tradition, but then in the late Roman period, east-west aligned graves became the norm. So we don't know whether we're dealing with a pagan cemetery here or a very early Christian one. But this particular reconstruction obviously said it's Christian from that, what you see there. And I gave a talk, last time I gave this talk some years ago was the anniversary of St. Padan's birth. And then people were saying, well, isn't this the burial site of St. Padan? And there is this in the Lives of the Saints book. Padan had 3 churches. And if it's not St. Padan's church, people say, well, perhaps it's one of those other churches he had somewhere around Llanbadarn, which is not inconceivable. It's exactly the right time period. It could be a St. Padan's, one of his churches. And since we've done that bit of work, it was unique at the time. It's still unique because more rectangular shaped grave surrounds have come up. Toby mentioned one this morning at Castell-Nadolig. But none of the buildings are all these square barrows rather than actual buildings themselves. But what they do have in common, every single one, and again the one at Castell-Nadolig is a classic example, is that they're all constructed on earlier sites of earlier burial sites, or in the case of Castell-Nadolig, an earlier settlement site. But obviously something which is there pre-existing, which they're always going back to make these very early medieval burial site cemeteries. Just to go back again, 1986, different times. This was done under a Manpower Services Commission job creation scheme. We had about 15 young unemployed people there working on the site. So it's all hand excavated at that time. And now you see the very first day of the excavation in 1986, working around the standing stone. And one thing that came up quite interestingly, the first thing we identified was the fact that the use of the race course, we're now into the 19th century, so people return to this location time and time again over 5,000 years. And little tiny post holes, which we think are probably sites of marquees or other things, set up to watch the racing. And it's pretty certain this standing stone was a location where you watched the horse racing. I mentioned the wine bottle, but around that stone we had hundreds and hundreds of pieces of broken wine bottle. And it seems though either in sort of joy or frustration, you smashed your wine bottle against a standing stone. In addition, there's a nice, someone's lost their stake, coin, and a silver propelling pencil. That's a bookmaker's pencil, again lost there. And again, just an indication of reconstruction of what they may have looked like a couple hundred years ago. So it's an immensely complex site. We're still trying to disaggregate what's actually happening there, and we still don't know everything. The actual excavation areas you see on that earlier side is quite small compared to the overall site itself. That there, I'm not sure what that is. What else is happening around here? We have no idea. None of these have been excavated. They could be more Iron Age burial mounds. They're the right size. They could be a lot earlier. Is this another sort of squared early medieval cemetery sites and building there? There's hints on aerial photographs of things happening here. There's the other standing stone. There's the other one. What's happening here? Where's the third stone that was shown on that 1832 map? In 1986, I remember the farm manager saying, some years previously we removed a stone which is further down the valley. Go back in. Further down to the west somewhere. What's happening there? There's lots of crop marks showing up in the area which Toby has photographed. So the actual landscape, there's a lot happening in this whole landscape. So I say I've been involved for almost 40 years, but still an awful lot more work to do there to find out what actually is happening here in total. So I think at that point I shall leave it.
Thank you very much, Ken, for that temporal fly-through. We had digital fly-throughs this morning. That was a fly-through time, I think. Any questions for Ken on Gogerddan? Yes.
We live in a house. We live in a house that's built on the Gogerddan land.
Right.
And interestingly, it's had two different Welsh names. we're just about to dig some of our garden up. What should we be looking for, and might we find evidence? These people that are buried had to live somewhere.
Yeah.
Will we find anything?
Well, one of the mysteries of Welsh archaeology is that in these early periods, into the Bronze Age, where we know where people were buried, about 4,000 burial mounds in Wales, so it's exactly where they're buried. We don't know where they lived. When we get to the Iron Age, apart from these bits here, I mean, we don't know where people were buried, basically. So we have hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of hill forts, defended farmsteads and similar sites. But we don't really know where they're buried. These are very unusual, these sites here. There's about 20 known burial sites in Wales in the Iron Age, which is a 700-800 year period. Probably, I don't know, 7 million people must have lived and died in Wales at that time. And we know about 20 burial sites, probably about 50 individuals altogether. So we just don't know where they were buried. So it's one of the mysteries we have here. So, don't know really. The artefacts are few and far between, so difficult to, you won't find artefacts. So unless you strip off topsoil like we did there, you won't know essentially what I'm trying to say. But if you are just digging a garden over, I won't worry about it too much. You won't go below.
So you don't think you need somebody with a watching brief?
No. I think as far as we're concerned, it happens below topsoil level. So unless you get below that, it's not really a problem. I mean, maybe some artefacts. You'll probably find some modern artefacts, modern bits of pottery and so forth.
Is there a link between the hill fort that's just above us and these people that are buried here?
Probably in the Iron Age, yeah. So those little ring ditches, yes, there will be. Well, one assumes there will be. But say that's one of the problems. It's tying those little bits together in a landscape. And what we're really, we always looking for, which is quite elusive, is the settlement sites of the Neolithic and Bronze Age. You have a 3,000 year long period where, apart from a few sites, you just don't know where people lived. They're very difficult to find.
Well, good luck anyway.
Yeah.
Any other questions for Ken?
Excuse me. In that Bronze Age, would the people be nomadic or would they be settled?
By the time you get to the end, they're settled.
Right.
Yeah, the very earliest period I showed with the little pit, the food, that's probably still semi-nomadic. But they are obviously growing crops, so again you are getting some settled life as well. So it's that sort of period where it's changing, life is changing in that period. By the time you get to the Bronze Age, very much settled farmsteads, fields and so forth, domesticated animals, domesticated crops, all sorts. So although we sort of on the screen sort of jump from one period to the next just in a flash of an eye, there's 1,000 years, 2,000 years between those. So again, we're just getting little insights of what's happening each time when we do this bit of work. And you have to try and fill those gaps of what happened between those 1,000 years, between the Neolithic and the Bronze Age and the Iron Age and so forth.
It's fascinating that you've got the Christian burials and the old pre-Christian burials on the same site. So presumably maybe a settled community, they changed religion and kept using the same burial ground. Yeah,
I think they're recognising this important piece of landscape.
Yeah.
And certainly by the time you got the early Christian, early medieval, I don't know if you are Christian, early medieval cemetery, that would have been built amongst, there'd been the standing stone there, those mounds would have been quite large at that time, so you'd have a whole set of burial mounds, and they're putting their cemetery in amongst those earlier things. Amongst them, literally there'd be mounds everywhere and perhaps more standing stones. So they actually knew what they were doing. It wasn't just a chance. As they did in earlier periods as well. So just going back and back and back to the same site, even to the race course, you could argue is part of that sort of same process.
Yes. Well, I mean, I think possibly to the racing community that could be a third religion, actually.
Not quite.
Do we have any questions from anybody online? No. No. Okay. In that case, I'd like to thank you, Ken, very much. for a super picture of Gogerddan. Thank you.
Thank you very much.